better aus.
No worries.
Awesome.
All right, thanks, Heath. All right, good morning, everyone. Thanks to those that have come back after last week's session, and I think we've got a few newcomers on the call as well. So we'll provide a little bit of context from last week around the intent of this, and then we'll get into some conversation about our stories and one of our stories in particular, Alex, and starting to think about where do the different groups see themselves playing a role in that in terms of capabilities. But to kick us off, this is about our Connected Care track at the upcoming Connectathon on the 25th and 26th of August in Brisbane. And the concept of the Connected Care track is really around having a couple of baseline patient journeys to use as, I guess, a starting point for us to show how systems can actually connect based on using the standards that are being developed and have some, I guess, show some capabilities like requesting and referral and so on. So today's session, we'll have a chat about the intentions behind that, what's next, and then, like I said, start to get into a bit of detail around each of the vendors and where you start to see yourselves in that work. So I just want to acknowledge the traditional custodians and owners of the respective lands on which we meet today and pay my respect to Aboriginal elders past and present. I extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people online today. So for context, in terms of the track leads for this, it's myself, so John Acey from Department of Health, Disability and Ageing. We've got Heath Frankel and Jane Gilbert as track leads, and also Uday from the Australian Digital Health Agency is also supporting this track as well. So baseline context is we did some work last year with some of the vendors and some of the vendors online to essentially develop a policy demonstrator from the department. And the intentions behind this were really to represent, one, how we were starting to adopt and implement system capabilities based on the standards that are in development. Also looking at some of the national capabilities that are coming through the Australian Digital Health Agency, and wrapping that into a couple of consumer stories. So we had a lady by the name of Alex who had a bit of a cancer journey, and then an older gentleman by the name of Yuri that had a fall, and there was some, I guess, some aged care elements to his journey, including cross-jurisdictional engagement with health services. And the idea behind the demonstrator, which we delivered in November last year in Canberra, was to really show, in a policy sense, what are we actually working towards in terms of our connected care agenda, and how are we starting to represent through current systems, but also what are the future state art of the possibles, things like care plans and connected referrals and so on. And I think what we learned from that is the way that we approached the demonstrator in Canberra was very much a system agnostic mock-up approach. So it wasn't actual data being connected and an actual flow of data. It was more around the concepts, and then we had clinicians at a series of stations talking to what was happening with the patient, what was happening to the clinician at that point, and what the systems were doing in that potential future state. The intention here with the connected care track is to take some of those baseline concepts and start to think about the normal approach that we would take in a Connectathon where we're testing standards, and actually thinking about how do we get a series of vendors to start to share data using what's being developed through development environments, an element of hacking to see how can we actually show a couple of these stories in a connected flow and really start to represent how the vendors are adopting the standards and starting to promote that to community as well, so that it's not just about the base concepts now, we're actually starting to deliver these standards, and there's some sensible ways that we can start to partner and represent that as well. So that's kind of the, I guess, the thinking of how we've gone from what is a policy demonstrator to essentially frame where we're going, and to, I guess, seek support from a government perspective to think about how do we start to use some of those baseline concepts in industry, starting to show how they're adopting standards and how we're working together to achieve that. So I might hand over to Heath to start to sort of talk in detail, but I think the main thing that I want to call out, and something that was discussed last week, was in terms of the intentions behind the connected care track. The primary, I guess, intention is to show how vendors are adopting the standards, how they're starting to emerge in terms of what you're implementing in systems in production, as well as what you're developing in your own dev environments. The art of the possible concepts, so some of the considerations that many aren't exploring yet, are more the opportunities from the hacking side of it. So I think there'll be a number of vendors that obviously won't be able to represent some of the future state components, but there might be some that are playing around the edges where it makes sense to, including from a consumer access perspective and so on. But I'll hand to Heath, and we might start talking about the more detailed components of the stories.
Yeah, so thanks, Jai. So yeah, just to reiterate, that's really what this track's about, is to demonstrate the use of FHIR and the Spark implementation guides, but in the context of an integrated end-to-end experience. Just a little bit of context also, a couple of weeks ago, we had a Spark testing event in Brisbane where we had about 50 people turn up into a hotel function room. And we had, I think there was 5 different scenarios that we were testing scenarios that we were playing with. But they had already started to get into this idea of going across implementation guides, not just testing AU core, not just testing patient summary, but we're actually wanting to go across the standards. So looking at how can we combine patient summaries with, say, e-requesting? How can we use smart apps for capturing form data and how that might be represented in AU core resources, and then things like care plans that the CSIRO have been working with as part of the clinical design groups with their management plans and smart health checks, etc. So I guess some of those, as usual with these sorts of tracks, we're really looking to share our experiences with each other and get some feedback through to the implementation guides. But I think also from a policy perspective, Jai's talked about, I think last week, and certainly with me during the week, that we're really wanting to see what the gaps are. So by getting onto the edge of what we can do today, what are the barriers to that, to actually go that next step? So are there policy changes that are necessary for that? And perhaps what are the specifications that we need? So again, at the testing event, we had a group that was actually looking at appointments and scheduling, and we don't have Spark or FHIR AU IGs for that yet, but it might be something that there's enough interest that we do need to do something around that space. And we've already got some demand for things like the smart app launch, and actually having some implementation guidance around some of the Australian nuances of how we would launch apps and pass context, because of the way that we represent things like provider numbers using practitioner roles, and that we want to launch out into forms with questionnaires and questionnaire responses, etc. So just a little bit of feedback on the Mentees that we did. Can I just get a hands up maybe from those that did not attend last week? I'm relieving you from filling out Mentees this week, so I don't have the usual, have you joined one of these before? But I would like to just get a hands up for someone who's turned up today that didn't turn up last week, just to get a sense of how much we need to go back over things. So we've got about 4. Okay. 5. A few more there. 6. 7. Yep. Excellent. Okay. So we've got quite a number then. So we went through a series of Mentees, and one of those was to find out the kind of systems that your organization is looking to bring to the Connectathon as part of this track. And so some of those that there's a real cluster around practice management, and it was a very broad practice management category. So we might want to drill down into that to break it down into specialists and GPs, etc., or allied health. There's a small cluster around pharmacy management, and then also diagnostic services. Sorry, I'm actually reading all that wrong. So it's health. The dots are above the description, so it's actually Health Information Exchange. Had three came along with that, and there were six others. And we asked those that were other um, in the chat, and they identified themselves as Provider Directory, which is the ADHA, Medicines Management. We got some pre-hospital triage and smart apps, and a diagnostic results solution there as well, and a little bit around consumer apps. There was two consumer apps that came along and one pharmacy management. So remember the colors of these dots because they mean something as we move through. So the next question was around HL7 Fire implementation guides that the system's implemented. So again, it was sort of one of those introductory slides, but it was actually a really interesting feedback here. Now the colored dots actually correlate back to those system types. So we've got three others, for example, that are implementing AU Core, and we've got 4 practice management systems that are implementing AU Core, and there's 3 HIEs that are implementing AU Core, and then we sort of got our e-requesting side of things here. So again, practice management was a big cluster there, and we've got patient summary being implemented by practice management systems and some other systems in there as well. So there's a real cluster around e-requesting, patient summary, and AU Core, which is not surprising. And obviously with the IPS sort of fitting in that category of patient summary as well. But also there's quite a significant cluster around smart app launch in there, but quite widely distributed. So consumer apps, even with those two that we got, they're basically going well across most of these categories here. So we've got Smart Health Links, there's one in there, there's a couple in the patient summary, a couple in the e-requesting, and generally in AU Core. So that was some interesting background. We then started to go through or introduced Alex and her story very briefly, and we'll go into that a little bit more today. And then started to break down the stations as we had in Canberra, where we started in the pathology collection centre, into the GP specialist, and through to the a day surgery, and then some discharge meds in the pharmacy, through to ongoing physiotherapy. So again, we start to cluster around here in the GP sector, but not just the practice management. We've also got a consumer app that's interested to work in that space. We've got another app, which again, I don't have any more details than that it's other. And there's a HIE in there. We've got a bit of a cluster around specialty, the specialists. So we've got a couple of others in there. We've got our practice management system in there. And then hospital, we've got HIEs, not surprisingly, and a couple of others in there as well. And then pharmacy, we've got a nice little cluster as well. So the point, I guess, of these clustering here is that now when we're trying to work out what is the scenario that we might want to actually focus on in the Connectathon, is, you know, not necessarily go from step 1 to step 6, but perhaps we start in the general practice or whatever, and just see if we can get a little group of people, vendors together to work around that scenario around general practice, or a bit of a cluster around a specialist and around hospitals, so that we can just probably get part of the story going and get some information flowing through that. But if we could get 2, 3, 4, and 5 working nicely, that would be a great outcome for the demo. And just briefly with Yuri, again, we've got the elderly man. This is a cross jurisdictional scenario where he normally lives in WA, rural WA, but he was visiting family in Canberra, had a episode in Canberra, but everyone that's back in at home, including GPs and daughter, is able to keep track of what's going on, but then also that follow up once Yuri gets home. So we've got a health direct scenario where we've got some virtual triage, we've got some ambulance and emergency events there through to hospital, admission and discharge, and the clusters start to peter out when we get back to the local health service and endocrinologists, but a nice little cluster around aged care there. So we also had this idea of, well, what themes are there? And this really goes back to, I guess, some of our IGs, but not just limited to our IGs. So we've got patient summary in here as well. And so we've got a couple of practice management ones there. We've got encounter record. So we've got a couple of people that are already looking at encounter record and discharge. We've also got some e-requesting groupings around that, and we've got a couple of our consumer apps there. We've got some e-prescribing, small cluster around there. So the idea here is, okay, even if we're not directly aligning with a particular station within the story, whether there's a clustering around a particular theme. And so there's a little bit around structured forms and assessments. There's a little bit around AI over here as well. And there's a little bit around appointments and bookings. So that's sort of stretching, I guess, into the futures. We did also get asked for any other themes, and there was some suggestion that maybe looking at getting data from more than one server, and I think that came from a consumer app, I suspect. And also the virtual video triage is some additional themes around that. Any sort of comments or reflections that others had from last week that they would like to share at this point? No.
All good for now, Heath. Thanks.
Sorry, Andrew?
I just said thanks, Heath. All good for now.
So what we thought, because we had a really nice clustering around in Alex's story, that people had some interest in, we thought we'd just step through today adding a little bit more depth of Alex's story. But again, keeping in mind, we're not held to this story. This is just a guide and somewhere for us to start. So if we want to go past this, that's fine, or adjust it. And again, we've got two stories to choose from, whether we want to actually work with across those two stories or just focus on one story and perhaps adapt slightly. For example, we don't have the telehealth in Alex's story, but perhaps there's a way that we can incorporate telehealth into Alex's story somehow. But then just focus on Alex's story. Otherwise, we can look at a little bit of a cluster around Yuri and just do, I don't know, the first 1, 2, or 3 steps or something or other, and then do some other steps in Alex's. So it's, again, coming down to what you guys would like to do. So we'll focus on Alex's story today, but then we'll probably have a look at Yuri's story. Or maybe as a result of going through things today, we think, no, we're good. Let's just flesh out Alex's story.
I think that's a really good call out, Heath, because we don't want it to seem like we're saying these are the absolute stories and everything has to be matched. Like we're setting this in stone. This is just a point of reference for what we've done in recent time as a starting point for the discussion. I think probably what I'd like to call out is this is intended to be something that vendors and the community can support moving forward. So if we have a successful event and everyone gets something from it, and particularly the hackathon versus the more structured sort of connections, then this is something that we can stand up at future connectathons as well. So don't think you can't dive in and say, well, what about this? What about that? Could we change that? Because that's what this process is about, and that's what we intend to do over the coming weeks leading up to the event.
And again, it's the difference between the art of the possible and what's realities and what we can actually achieve in the next few weeks. So, definitely, even though we're starting early, it's still not a lot of time for us to get something new built. So we acknowledge that, and basically looking for you to bring what you have. But if you really want to experiment with something a little bit extra, then we're certainly encouraging that, and that's the hackathon part. But if you're just really bringing your infrastructure, we need that too. So for others that are perhaps looking to be a little bit innovative on top of that, the basic infrastructure are what I've been using in the incumbent infrastructure that we have here today and now that we're building our digital health systems on top of. That's our reality, and we have to deal with that as we migrate towards the future. To be honest, not quite sure how we move through this other than just pointing out, I guess, some of the themes that I've sort of highlighted on each station. I know that Jane has actually got a bit of a sequence diagram, so that she has been putting some thought around how we could potentially do some real exchange of data rather than just these conceptual stories. So what I might very briefly do is just go through the story and then hand over to you, Jane. Is that all right? And we'll see where we go from there. But I guess as an outcome, really, from today, I'm kind of just handing it over to you guys. For you guys to sort of step in and say, I can do this, but I can't exactly do it that way. But, can we adjust the story this way so that it can fit within what you want to do? So really starting to hand over to you guys now, and so that we can flesh this out. So story starts with a pathology collection center, and I've got the cancer registry, which is probably not quite right. But we've got a request that's come from the screening registry. We're going in and having a request done. We've got the samples that have been collected. The pathology is publishing some results. We've got some risk factors associated with that, and we've got notifications that results are available, and the GP has been informed of those results. Alex then goes off to the practice, and we've got a consult going on there. There's an update to the patient summary. There's a care plan that's created. We've now got something that we need to track as part of a care plan, and the provider directory is used to find a specialist. So we've now got a referral to the specialist, and we're making some appointments. So even just through those couple there's a lot that we could potentially do. So we've got lab reports, patient summaries, we've got some care plans, we've got an e-requesting scenario, we've got appointments. So just in that is quite considerable. Then we actually move into the specialist area. And again, that's, I guess, looking at specialist notes, the more diagnostics reporting. We've now got some prescriptions that are being written. We've got theatre bookings to hospitals, and we've got a consumer app that's keeping track of all the updated information here as well. And then we move into hospital We've got some things like pre-admission forms that we could consider that need to be filled out. There's some consent forms, or at least some kind of consent that is required. And then there's procedure notes, discharge summaries, and further follow-up appointments. And then we've got the pharmacy that needs to deal with discharge medications. We've got some dispensing history that might actually help out through that process. There might be some further consultation with the pharmacist that might result in perhaps an encounter record, and then the consumer app can also keep track of ensuring that the new medications are being taken. And then finally through to our allied health, e-referrals and appointments. So perhaps just before I jump to Jane, I'll just seek some feedback. And I see Nicole, you've got your hand up.
Hi, sorry, my camera's not working. I'm not too sure why. I just wanted to ask a question. We are going to plan to have the provider directory available. Happy to have some test data created to support these stories. Is it possible to understand who's interested to do some real world data exchange with the provider directory in this scenario? If that's anyone on the call, can you just shoot me an email, reach out, and we can maybe have a chat about what we do in that space to make it come to life? This story or the other story, Yuri's story as well, I think has some providers in it too. So I just more of a call out really to say, we're going to be there, we're going to be contributing. If you'd like to do something, just give me a yell and we can start to nut out the details together.
Okay. I mean, that's somewhat the point of these weekly sessions, Nicole, is for us to do exactly that. So work out who's going to interact with which system and then coordinate things like data to fit the story, etc. So
Perfect.
not sure
I'm right on scope then.
Yeah, absolutely. That's but basically what I'm saying, it's not necessarily that's what this session is for to some extent. Not to say that it won't be out of session sort of conversations being had as well. I hope that I don't need to be in the middle of every conversation. It's just more around it's getting a cluster of people like you've suggested just then, and start to work it out amongst that. We've got obviously Uday who's supporting, so from the agency as well. So Uday might and is helping us as the track leads. Uday might sort of take a little cluster of vendors together to facilitate a particular station, for example. And then Jai might work with one group. Jane might work with one group maybe around results, because that might be something that she is interested in focusing on from Telstra Health perspective. And then I can probably help a group of people perhaps around a patient summary or encounter record or appointment booking scenario. So that's kind of what we're trying to work through here, is a bit of a clustering and then self-management, and getting back together each week to see what are the blockers are and how we can release these blockers. Danielle?
And we've got some online channels as well that we'll talk towards the end of the session where we can capture some of these groupings and some of the emerging work. Danielle?
So the thing I wanted to, I think, talk about what Nicole has raised and then what you raised, Heath, is if we're looking to even get connected between like steps 2, 3, 4, 5, then we need to, I guess, decide on like personas. Like, if the patient's in New South Wales and those kinds of things. So I think we need to be have to have an understanding and an agreement of like who are we trying to look up and have that shared kind of test data coming through, so and have a space for it. Otherwise I think we've got the I guess, an increased risk of silos with where we can just do like step 2 to 3, but those people have worked together to work out which kind of um, organizations they've decided to include and so yeah, I wanted to say that I think both of those are really important. I think there would definitely be some. It makes sense to me that Nicole, that there would be some in particular, like maybe offline from these specific things around people who are connecting to AUPD. But I think the kind of like the shared theme of running across the multiple scenarios, I think we ideally, I think we have to have that in this meeting, in particular because of things around like the test data and the operations that we have to synchronize.
And that's one of the reasons why we've kind of suggested the use of these original stories is because we already have the persona. It's Alex and Yuri. We also have test data that we created as part of the November event that was actually used as part of the mock-up. So the vendors that were involved in helping with those designs and mock-ups were given that data. And so we actually have our organization names and clinic names and lab names, etc., already from that perspective. Again, it's not necessarily be all and end all, but we do have a starting point. So completely agree that we do want to ensure that this is Alex's story. I mean, Alex's persona could change if we decide, but it's certainly, I think, beneficial given the timeframes that we sort of leverage what we've already got from that perspective. Not to say
Yeah,
that
I
it's
don't
not
think
more
we had
data
any
to go.
test data available from the provider directory at that point. We weren't ready at that point with anything. So it might be worthwhile. I totally agree with Danielle's point. You know, if we're talking about a GP, do we at the agency have that GP with the data that, you know, is assigned to Alex's GP set up in the provider directory so that any of these scenarios, any of the software vendors that want to be able to showcase Alex's GP is actually pinging our provider directory, getting that GP's test data and pulling it through. So that was sort of where I was trying to get to say, if you're interested, we can build this out. We can pop some of those clinicians in the provider directory and they then can be utilized during this journey or during Yuri's journey. So if everyone's happy with that, I can absolutely see if we can facilitate that and we can get some test data circulated to the group.
Yeah.
But it'd be really important, I think, to really identify exactly who wants to have that mocked up versus who wants to actually interact real time.
So, Jai,
Could we
I'm
even start
assuming
with
you can provide that test data.
Yeah, so we've got the base information that we have with the demonstrator there. We can work through that. Sorry,
could
Daniel.
because there's a HL7AU test data repository that's meant to be an easy kind of shared space that people can go, here's stuff that we can then build from. And so from Connected Care, I think we should just add a Connected Care folder and put the initial set of content, and then that's free for to be managed and updated and built from, and that's how people can load it.
Sounds good. If there's no other comments, I might flick to you, Jane.
Okay, let me. Yes. Share my screen. Now I've taken what Heath has just presented and created a draft sequence diagram around what the participants are, what the potential interactions are. Obviously, as we've said, we can modify this, we can work on it once we sort of start to flesh out and sort of get an understanding of what vendors can do and which participants they could play a role in and which interactions they can actually provide. So just as a overview, and I've just realized that so I've got a full sequence diagram. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yep, that covers sort of all of them. I've just realised, Nicole, when I've done the overview one, it hasn't included the provider directory, but I will fix that. It is definitely in the further down detailed each scenario kind of diagram. So each of those, I guess we've just sort of pulled them out. Each little block is, one of those boxes that Heath was showing. So obviously the screening and results part. So, looking at where a consumer app could do, or some, Alex could log in and do that booking. Hopefully, we could get a consumer app or some other system if we can, as we said, we can modify this. But a app that can submit an e-request, possibly to a HIE, and make that available for a pathology system to pull that down. And then obviously send the results as well. So I've done the same for each of these. It's probably easier to go to each individual one because it gives you a bit more detail. So for our first scenario, let me just bring it into the middle. It's a bit more detail there. As I said, you could sort of post an e-request, which multiple vendors, we know are doing in production now, to HIE. We've got pathology companies that can pull those down and actually do things with them, create requests, results, and then can we show how we can? I know it's a capability. Telstra Health are hoping that we can provide a system that actually takes a HL7 version 2 result and actually converts that to FHIR and sort of demonstrate that we have in development at the moment. Then, potentially down the bottom, I've got additional scenario where possibly those results go back to a consumer app. They can also go to the cancer screening registry if we want to do that step. They can go back to a GP. So I guess this is just sort of a starting point where we can go, okay, which vendor, we're now asking the vendors to say, yes, I could play that role in this scenario, or I could play that role, but can we change it to this, or etc. And I've done the same for each of the scenarios. So then the next one is around, I've provided directory now, Nicole. So we've got Alex now goes to the GP and, they review the results together. They create a share care plan, which can go somewhere. And then they actually look up the provider directory for the specialist, get the endpoint, and then actually submit the referral. And then hopefully, a specialist can pick that up. So these are just, as I said, just sort of makes it a bit more explicit around the participants and the interactions that we're hoping to start to go through. And then the next one, which is the specialist scenario, where we're hoping to obviously see the participant. We've got the referral. We can do some work within the specialist system, book a procedure, and that can go back to a consumer app. Next one is around our hospital use case, so sending forms and consent, and then updating care plans, discharge summaries, etc. Our pharmacy interaction one as well, and then our final one, which also has some allied health. So again, once we start to understand, we can sort of modify the scenarios a little bit if we need to, depending on vendor capability. Any questions on that? Or does anyone want to look at anything in more detail?
On I think it was number 2 on like your second example for Alex for the care plan. Yeah, this one here.
Yep.
Would it make sense, or should the consumer app be able to view and fetch the care plan, the shared care plan?
Yeah, again, if we have a system that's able to do that, and we can, so yeah, we can definitely modify all of these depending on what people are able to do. So I think you know, it's the next step that we sort of put these out. We get people to have a look at them. We get the vendors to nominate what could be possible, which which participants they could play in, what interactions they could do at this time, or what they would be able to do by the Connectathon as a starting point. And we can say whether we need to sort of modify the scenarios a little bit. Yeah.
So to you, Kyle, I mean, we obviously need to produce a care plan for it to be viewed. So we need to have the other half of that transaction. So this is the sort of thing that we need to sort of work through is, okay, you've made your suggestion. It's a great one. Now we need to find someone that will work with you to produce that care plan. Knowing what Liam's been doing around the GPCM, I can't say that acronym quickly.
GGCMP.
Yeah, you know,
CMP, GGP.
It might actually be worth perhaps having a chat with Liam. He's obviously not on this call and probably not aware of this, but it's probably a great opportunity to bring that app that he's been working around on the care plan to potentially fill that role, even though it's not the full shared care plan vision that the demonstrator was pitching at the time. It's a small step towards it, and that's exactly what we're trying to achieve here, I think. And obviously there is the bigger picture around that care plan initiative, but at the moment it is the CCMP that we have, and there is an app that's demonstrating that. So that might be worth you starting that conversation with Liam to see if we can bring that into this particular station.
And you know, if we want to do patient summary, do we look at, okay, attaching to the referral a patient summary or having a link to a patient summary that the specialist can then view? So yeah, open to any kind of ideas around, you know, where we can add things in.
Yeah, and obviously we need to fill that. That one's a smart app as well. So we need probably a GP practice management system that's going to be able to fill out that care plan. So I think Landon's on the call. So maybe there's a candidate there to work with to launch the care planning smart app from best practice.
We could do
then getting that back stored somewhere. Not sure if there's a capability to store a questionnaire response, but I'm sure with Better on the call or anyone else that's able to store a questionnaire response somewhere, even if it's the Spark server, then perhaps your app can then retrieve it from there. So that's the kind of detail that, you know, we need to flesh through. I think what about some of the hospital side of things there? Like we've got the specialists. Andy, you're sitting quietly. I'm sure you might have something to say, or is there some interest there around perhaps doing some theatre bookings or looking at how a admission assessment could be integrated with that, maybe with a smart app for a consumer? Is that something that would be worth considering in that station?
Potentially. Sorry, I only just arrived to the call. Yeah, we've got theatre booking. But I'm not sure that there would be any hospital groups coming along to act as the hospital. It's, you know, like it has a kind of well-defined workflow associated with it. It's not kind of a data-centric model. It's a workflow-centric model. But yeah, could do that.
And I mean, again, it doesn't necessarily need to flow end to end. We can mock up the middle bits. Andrew, you're on the call, and any other hospital vendors that may be on the call that I haven't seen. Obviously, Angela there as well. Is there any interest in thinking about sort of procedure bookings or pre-admission assessment forms using consumer app?
I can't really speak for technically, I guess, but certainly I think there'd be interest in exploring that. I know Jean-Louis on the call, but perhaps that's something we can take away and consider.
Yeah, similar for us, looking at the procedure flow and the consent forms, etc.
Okay. What about results, Angus? Is that something that I know you were worried that we didn't necessarily have a pathology system that could actually supply results? Is there anyone that thinks that we could find someone that can bring a system along to play that role, or do we dummy one up using some results in the Spark server or something?
I can dummy up a result, but what's that applying to as far as standards? Like the Telstra Health created a bit of an IG for results based off AU Core, but it's far away. It's just based off AU Core, so it's a fair way from it.
I think that's part of the thing we're trying to, Jai mentioned earlier, is like we need to know what we need from a policy and a standards perspective. So showing what we're doing and what we're playing in the space, but saying, hang on, this isn't like a standard yet. Like we are actually starting to do this, but this is what we need. And like Heath said with the appointments, like we need these bits and pieces of the puzzle to actually be developed and put on the agenda so that we can actually make this a reality, like as a standard, as using standards rather than just, making our own thing up.
The best one I can think of in my head is, but I don't know who's going to do it, is you place a pathology report and you look up a copy to doctor in the provider directory. You get their provider number as the doctor you want to send the copy of the report to. But I haven't got, I'm not going to spin up in 3 weeks. We're not going to implement in 3 weeks provider directory into Telstra Health's e-requesting platform in any way, shape or form. We're not even going to hack it in 3 weeks. You could muck around and work with provider directory to go, how do I make this API call? How do I get authentication to your system? And just make the call? But there's going to be nothing to show, right? What am I going to demo? I ran some code and it returned back this doctor that I searched for. And I put it into a JSON via e-request that I sent nowhere. I don't know what you're demoing, right? Like,
yep. So what can we come up that is doable, Angus? So is there some? Doesn't even have to be like we've got V2 messages around pathology flying around all over the country, right? But how does that fit into this new world of FHIR-based systems? Is there, as we want to bring those into a lot of, say, systems are looking to perhaps bring in AU Core data into their systems, including potentially results, but don't have the V2 or vice versa. So is there something that we can?
Well, I've got V2 to FHIR converters for results, right? You can take an ADRM V2 message and turn it into a Telstra Health FHIR result, which is inherited and based off AU Core in elements of it, not in its entirety, right?
But that's fine.
but I don't know what I can do with that. Well, I mean, we don't have I'm not hearing of a diagnostic lab involved. Maybe the Epics or the Cerners, but I don't know. Put your hand up if Heliosonic or ACL are here. I don't think they are. So,
And
Sorry, what was the first one that you said? Who's here?
I don't know if an Epic or a
Epic.
Cerner can do a V2 ADRM result. And I don't know quite what I'm doing with that. So I'm going to
Well,
convert
Epic
it
is
to
on the line, so they could answer. Andrew?
Yeah. Pathology is my one of my weaknesses, unfortunately. So Angus, I think I'm happy to connect with probably someone like Corey who can better answer our pathology capabilities.
I think the conversation about V2 to fire is actually a really important current conversation as well. So I think, if there's opportunities to represent current world V2, future state fire in some of these scenarios, then that's really good, because we're talking then about what is the transition. And this comes back to what Jane said, what are the gaps? What are the things we actually need to do to support that transition from current state V2 into fire? And perhaps what are some of the scenarios where it will take quite some time because V2 is so embedded? So I think it'd be important if there are scenarios like that we can represent.
we just got to start the scenario somewhere as well, even if it is just a mocked up E2 message that we drop into a folder and that triggers the rest of the process, right? So yes, it's not. This is more for our purposes. We're not demonstrating to anyone in particular. Obviously, some outcomes will come out of it. There'll be some learnings out of it. And this is probably not going to be the first time we run this track. It's going to probably be a progressive thing. So this is your opportunity to perhaps play with some stuff. But obviously, you've got a day job. And ideally, it's working within what you guys are doing within your day job and to actually show that this is what people are actually doing here in Australia. And yes, it's based on AU Core, which is perfect. That's exactly what we're looking for. AU Core is not the be all and end all.
This kind of the problem is that AU Core is not a workflow, right? AU Core is like something to build on top of. And e-requesting is a workflow. So we have that sort of like, you can clearly say to someone, that you can place an e-request like this, you can go get it. But it sort of stands alone, right? So we've got some systems out there we know can place requests, like Magentis and Telstra can place e-requests, right? We haven't got a lab in the room participating to pick that up. So it's kind of a dead end, right? Like we can place, and that was my point about provider directory. You could have one of the systems that can place an e-request within that flow, try and look up a copy to doctor in the provider directory, look up Dr. Brown and add him to the e-request. But it sort of ends there, right? Like, and then even so we've got results stuff. And to my point that AU Core is not a workflow, right? Like it's not even a pathology result, really. It's kind of like a base that you can build on top of, which is what we have done in-house, is built pathology reports in Fire on top of AU Core and base. But I haven't got a lab who can produce one of those. I can convert a V2 message into one of those.
Yep.
But
Sounds
it's kind
good
of
to me.
another. It's kind of another isolated. It's like, I mean, I show it to you now. Like it's built right. Like and convert a V2 to a Fire. But I could demo that. But like here's a V2 message, and there is its Fire output. It's not really demonstrating a UI or something doing it. It's just a conversion from A to B.
Yep. And if someone can pick that up and do something within the next step is really what we're looking to achieve. Okay.
Yeah, you can put that in a Fire server, and then I don't know, someone who can quickly whip something up in 3 weeks to render that to someone.
Well, we've got the consumer
all
apps
the
that
stuff.
are suggesting that they're able to look at those results, right?
Yeah, so just wanted to add that I have lots of interfaces for AU Core data. So for some demonstration purposes, I can render some results and so on. So something that I can provide for the connected on pretty quickly.
So I could maybe put from a V2 put a result in a fire server, but Ilya, you could. So then you've got a pathology report to Telstra Health ID, which I can sort of give you a copy of for the thing. Yeah, and you could render that. You could sort of maybe fake between placing an order. You can place orders, can't you? E-request orders.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We
you could
tested it a couple of times.
So we could maybe fake between you replace an e-order specifically for the result I'm going to set up for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can sort of make the leap to go, okay, here's the result to that e-order, which you could render.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a hack between that e-request. We're just then jumping to like, oh, magically produce this result, but you could sort of fudge that in one fire server. So you place the request into the fire server. We sort of shoehorn in the result for that request into the fire server, and then you try and render that as if here's the result coming back. I'd love to somehow link the service request into the result, maybe somehow as a kludge.
Yeah. So for those others on the call, this is the kind of conversations we've got to have, right? So I would encourage you to please go and check out the track page. And I can put that on the, if someone can, maybe
I've dropped it in the chat.
Oh, great, thanks. So if you can go to the track page, but if you want to reach out to me or Jai, probably myself in particular, around some of the stations that you're interested in, but in that track page as well, let's see, hopefully that'll come up. Yeah. There is, again, a summary of those. Oh, that's the wrong one. Sorry. We've got the Zulip chat. We've got the track page. So if you can go to the Confluence page, there's some materials around the journeys in there. So we've got Alex's story here that gives a summary of that. But if you got the go to the participant page, even just register your system yet, even though you may not have a particular journey or story or station that you're interested in, just register your system at the moment so that we know that you're interested. But reach out to me if you want to have a bit more of a conversation. I can cluster you up with, but these are the sorts of conversations that we need to have and just brainstorm how we're going to make this to happen. There was, I don't know whether it was Platypus or Scripty that were had indicated that it was able to look at results, but if we can have consumer view, we could have a provider view of these results, and also we've got things like the hospital referrals, etc. So I think next week we'll just do another session similar to this. Maybe we can go one step at a time and try and flesh out who's interested in each of these. But I think we do need to start to progress this in between calls as well. So please reach out to me if you're interested in a particular section and got some ideas. Jane, I'm sure we'll put those sequence diagrams up on the wiki somewhere too. People, if that helps, we can flesh those out. Ilya, and I guess one comment is we don't want to overload you. We don't want one person to be doing something not different on each of the stations. We want to allow everyone to have a bit of a play in something. But this is a bit more like a connect-a-thon rather than just a full story. There's no reason why we couldn't have more than one person playing a similar role either. So if we've got multiple GP practice management systems, there's no reason why they couldn't duplicate that same connection. So more the merrier. Similar with the hospitals. Jason and Andrew will probably have a chat with you about medications, but I think we'd be interested in someone that wants to be able to consume our medicines history somehow as well. So that might be a consumer app. Perhaps Mina, we can have a chat with you if that's of interest. And then I think there's the stuff around appointments. And Landon, Marika, I know you were interested in that a couple of weeks ago. So think about which area that you would like and reach out to me, or just put yourself up on the wiki page.
Yeah, we'll add ourselves to that page, mate. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
That's all.